here at ACO Radio, American Communications Online, or any affiliated stations or websites are not responsible for what guest hosts or call-ins may say. All programming is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only.
Thank you. That was the Mad Painter, better known as T.R. Becker, Thomas R. Becker of Georgia. He is our general manager for our various affiliated radio stations. This is TJMRCT Radio with ACO, American Communications Online. We also have Revolution Radios, Cosmos Radios, and Aquarian Radio. So we're doing this for all of those that like to carry our shows. And today we're representing UFO Association in a niche genre, or niche if you'd like to say, with Jan Aldrich of Connecticut. He's actually a ufologist for many, many years, has a very interesting background. He spent over 25 years in the military and in the post office. So I'll let him introduce himself, and then we'll get on with this report we're going to start doing every week on Mondays preferably, and it'll be 4 to 6 Eastern. And we'll have it right here on ACO Radios at TJ Mars ET Radio is our address and our call sign, TJ Mars ET Radio since 2012. Jan Aldrich, can you hear me? And would you like to introduce yourself with your history and why you're doing this, please?
Okay, my name is Jan Aldrich. I have a history degree from University of Maryland University College. I've spent 25 years in the military, in the Army, and retired as a Master Sergeant, and 25 years with the Post Office. I've been interested in UFOs since I was in junior high. That's a little over 50 years now. This particular program, I hope we can talk about the very early days of the UFO project and introduce some of the people that were involved in it. It's this information is not currently available. I hope to write it up, but if I should pass on, there'll be this program that people can reference to. Now, what I've done is a lot of this information has come from going to the National Archives of the Air Force History Research Agency in Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama, and many times just turning one page over at a time. Some of this stuff is just, you just come across it. You've got to look in likely files, and you may just come across, look at hundreds of pages, and there's one page on UFOs that jumps out there. So, I think that's, we should start with a little bit about the Second World War, and let's
go from there, huh?
Yeah, let's start there.
All right, now with this series 1, episode 1, would you say that this is the beginning as far back as the records you can find in the history that you've done, like boots on the ground, and like you said, going to research, so you found a hard copy or what, finding a fact, at least in written form? I know you didn't go back to the cuneiform or to the clay tablets back in Samaria. So
let's talk about scientific and official or government investigating UFOs, not just the U.S. government. So this goes back to a place called Robo Zero in Russia. It's one of the best documented UFO cases, and it goes back over 300 300 years. So this goes back quite a ways. Now,
Wow. I didn't. Okay. Well, yeah. If you'll timeline it,
yeah.
and then we'll move forward. That'll be great. Sort of a linear timeline according to Jan Aldrich. All right.
Right. So
there you go.
So there were objects in the sky seen by a Japanese general close to the same time, and he had his advisors do a little investigation on UFOs. So there are, through the years, there are things that come up. 1892, the Russian defense minister had an investigation of unusual things seen around Russia's border and within Russia, and he had a technical group go ahead and investigate these things. So it's not just 1947 when this happened. There are various ad hoc inquiries. In other words, a sighting is made, and maybe military or scientific people will look into the sighting, and it gets filed somewhere, and then we found it. During the First World War, there was the FBI had a file on alleged German aircraft seen over the United States. So, of course, there was no way for German aircraft to get here. So that just, we're obviously dealing with something else here. But what I'd like to do is go back to generally the beginning of the more modern era, not 1947, but in the Second World War, and introduce some of the players that will be in here later. One of the interesting players is General McDonald, and he is an intelligence officer, and during World War II, air intelligence, they're making this up as they go along. They don't. And
do you have a date when you tracked his name down, McDonald, we'll have more to go on?
He's been in the Army. He's not a general at the beginning of the war, but he is high up in the intelligence structure. And when the war starts, say 1941, he's sent to Europe later on, and he more or less, he's not the head in Europe, but he's way up there. And
so World War II, 1941 to 43 in the Pacific, is that where we're starting? Japanese attack Pearl Harbor?
Yeah, Japanese attack Pearl Harbor. But a lot of these interesting people are in Europe. So when the war starts in Europe, McDonald he's going to be very important during the war and after the war. Now, when the invasion of Europe starts by the Allies, there's right behind the troops. There's people looking for things. They're looking for, especially the Army Air Force. They're looking for aircraft, German aircraft that they could salvage, or even if they can fly it away. And the person that's in charge of that is named Watson, Colonel Watson. And he is going to be big in UFOs during almost the whole of Project Blue Book. He is going to be very important. He commands a squadron that's known as Watson's Wizards. And what do I mean? Whiz, whiz. And what they're doing is they're trying to capture serviceable German aircraft that work, and they're flying them. In fact, sometimes they're ahead of the troops, and they're trying to capture them and sending these things back to the line so that they can be looked at. And they're finding aircraft hidden. The Germans in some cases didn't have enough fuel, so they just abandoned these things, buried them, or things like that. So Watson's finding these aircraft, and he's especially interested in jets and rockets and advanced aircraft. And he and his pilots are collecting these things and flying them back.
Okay.
So then there's another fellow whose name is Howard McCoy. He's a colonel, and he's set up in London, and he has this giant microfilming thing. And his people are in Europe, and they're following the troops too, and they're looking for plans, manuals, aircraft, as far as performance data, engineering studies, anything that has to do with German aircraft, and they're especially interested in advanced German aircraft that are on the drawing boards but haven't been produced yet. And they're finding these things hidden in wells and caves and farmhouses under hay and everything, and they're looking for these things. They're looking for the records of the German Air Force. That's one of the things they see. They managed to seize that before they were destroyed. And they're taking this stuff back to England and microfilming it, and then sharing it with the British. So this man becomes very important in UFOs after the war is over. There's another fellow, Miles Gall. He becomes somewhat of an important character later on in the 50s in UFOs. And there's let me see. There's one other guy that's really important.
Well, you take that, and I'll put World War II in that Nazi Germany's attacked Poland in September 1939, but the United States, folks, doesn't enter the war until after the Japanese bombed the American fleet in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii on December 7th, 1941. So that's sort of how a lot of people, as baby boomers, remember it due to movies and things like that. But between those two events, President Franklin Roosevelt, he worked to prepare the Americans for conflict. But, my grandfather was great. It's my mother's grandfather was in Poland, and she remembers listening on the radio in Clarks, Louisiana, where they were listening on the radio, and my grandfather was crying because he was from Poland. So that really impressed her, and I know that it was very sad time for people back then. So I guess that was Franklin Roosevelt. But go ahead.
We didn't invade France until 1944. Now, we had already invaded Italy prior to 1944. And there were people as they went up through Italy, they were looking for advanced German aircraft and things like that. This is the Army.